Hi, I'm Michael Hartman,
I'm Naomi Liu.
And I'm Mike Rizzo, and this is OpsCast,
a podcast for marketing ops pros
and RevOps pros.
Created by the Mo Pros, the #1 community for marketing operations professionals.
Tune in to each episode as we chat with real professionals to help elevate you in your marketing operations career.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of OpsCast, brought to you by marketingops.com, powered by the Mo Pros. It's been a long gap, so for those who are following along closely, thanks for being patient. I'm your host, Michael Hartman, joined today by one of my co-hosts, Mike Rizzo. You're going to plug Mopsapalooza, right?
Somewhere in the middle of this episode, there's like dynamic content, and then I'm probably going to talk about it. People are probably seeing me talk about it a lot, but yeah, Mopsapalooza in Anaheim, November. Paula's going to come. She's already thinking about it. Paula's our guest today. You're going to hear from her in just a second.
So let's jump into it. So our guest today is Paula Gorman, she's going to be here talking to us with us about the importance of project management, program management, and how it applies to marketing ops, revenue ops. Paula is the owner of Lift Group, consulting firm she started that is focused on operational improvements and digital transformations to support organizational efficiency and scale. She has also held leadership roles in customer success, implementation, and project program management, a number of different places. So Paula, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
And thanks for coming to Mopsapalooza.
Yeah, sign me up.
She's come. That's it.
VIP tickets I expect in the mail shortly.
Oh, okay. I see how it's going to be.
That means you're coming to, so the VIP pass means you're coming to Disneyland the day after the event. So,
Great.
If those showed up, it'd be very magical.
Really?
I know. Sorry. Dad jokes.
You had to go there. Well, you won't see me there. That is just not my jam. Disneyland. Yeah. I don't have a problem with it, and I don't have a problem with people doing it, but yeah.
You know what? I'm with you. Not the topic of conversation for today, but I'm with you.
Yeah,
but I have 2 small children now, so the magic is through their eyes, and
that's
it's a little
right.
bit different. So,
yeah. All right. Well, let's jump into this, but first, so Paula, I think some of your stuff has changed recently, like the Lift Group, and kind of jumping in on that. And I know you're working with 10x4 as well. But why don't you, I gave this 2-second summary of your career. Yeah. Why don't you share a little bit more about your background and how it's going to help feed into this conversation we're about to have on project program management, how it applies to marketing ops and ops in general.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So my career started in project and program management, and I did that in a number of different settings and industries. First off, in management consulting. So I had that very staid corporate feel initially out of school. And then from there moved, I actually did my little stint in, I suppose, marketing was at a brand naming agency. So that was fun. And then I actually decided that I wanted to get into tech. I'm in the Bay Area, right? And so this is the epicenter of it. And so I wanted to do that. And the way it made sense for me to do that was take my project and program management experience and pivot, but get into a PM role in a tech setting. So I went into robotics as I wanted the hardware and software component to learn both at the same time. And then from there, went into vertical farming. And then I thought, maybe I'll drop this hardware piece and focus on the software. And so I've been in SaaS for the last 5 or so years. And at that point, moved into more of a customer success implementation type of role and managed and built teams there. But really, really, really and truly, project management is the through line in my career, as well as generally operational efficiency. So in all of my different roles, I've leveraged those skills and then found that particularly the operational piece is something that I really, really enjoy. So I left corporate in mid-February and have been doing consulting work and some work with 10x4, some on my own, and it's all focused on operational efficiency and tool implementation and tech stack evaluation and things of that nature. So it's been fun.
That's great. So a quick question. You said you sort of shifted to PM at the robotics company. I was going to ask, was that project management or was it product management?
project.
Okay.
Yeah, I've worked shoulder to shoulder with a lot of product managers, but never done that myself.
Yeah, we've had at least one guest on where we kind of talked about sort of the not the I guess the parallels between product management and what marketing ops folks have to do with sort of managing tech stack and projects and all that. So I think we'll get into some of that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for that. So one of the things you and I discussed when we were planning this episode a while back is and I talked about this actually recently with some people, like the differences between the levels, or you might call them dimensions, of project or program management, right? So to me, there's like, think of it like size and scope, like daily repeatable stuff versus sort of different kinds of change of the business, small, medium, large projects or initiatives. And maybe like different domains and things like that. But how do you think there's a difference in how you should approach those kinds of things when it comes to planning and managing all the kind of work that a team is doing? Or is there one sort of overarching approach that you take for that?
Yeah, for me, from my experience and perspective, is the way in which I'm managing projects or programs is relatively the same. But like you said, it's about the scale and scope. So the way I think about it is program management is at the highest level and typically is more about outcomes, and projects are more about the outputs. So you may have a program that is some larger strategic initiative that should be a company goal, KPI, something like that. And then you may have projects that roll up into that program. And that's just a way to structure and separate organizationally, whether that's by domain or bucket of work or something like that, however an organization wants to structure it. But at the end of the day, when I think about the project and program management work that I've done, my approach is generally the same of what are we ultimately trying to achieve, and by when, and what with what budget, and who's involved. And then let's like work right to left from there. And that's going to be the same at the programmatic level and at the project level. Now, I'll say on the project side, that's where I think you can get more into the standard repeatable and tasks and into the minutia. And programs tend to be maybe a little bit more nebulous, or company goals change or strategies change, particularly at startups. It's like, this is what we think we're doing for the next quarter, and then never mind. So let's scrap most of that. So programmatically, this is changing a little bit, but we still need to launch this particular thing and do this thing. So these projects aren't going to change so much.
So Mike, I think you're about to ask something too, but I'm curious. So I think I used the term change the business, but I think of those like smaller repeatable ones are like run the business. I mean, is that do you still think that like run the business? And the reason, I'll give you the example in marketing ops. This is very often the case, right? So if there's other people who came up with this concept of 4 pillars for marketing ops. And one of them, I always tell people, like the most visible that marketing ops folks is campaign ops, right? So they're doing this support for outbound activity all the time, highly visible, both positive and negative, right? If things go well, but you could be the bottleneck that doesn't get things out the door, or at least perceived as that. But then there's like change the business stuff you want to do that typically falls in the other ones, like better reporting, better integrations, evaluate new tools, that kind of stuff. So that's I was trying to get at that a little bit of like that. Like every day we've got to have some amount of our time allocated to that, because we don't have enough resources to really we're just going to have people dedicated to doing just the day-to-day stuff. And then a separate team of people who are going to do like these bigger, more strategic projects, if you will. Have you run into that before? And do you still kind of think about it holistically like that? Or do you separate those somehow?
Yeah. So the work that I do right now with my clients is a lot of the change the business and then get them to a place where they can run the business more efficiently. And so I think I can live in that space where I can do a little bit of both. But thinking back to when I was project and program managing larger scale and at these larger organizations, no. Like if I'm tasked with being the project manager, which means I own this entire scope of work, I'm focused on that. I don't think that I can kind of also then typically focus on how am I going to like holistically make this place or this department more efficient. I might have an idea that I'm going to lob to someone else whose job it is to go do that because I'm still focused on project X. So I think you hit the nail on the head talking about it typically is and probably should be two different people. So someone who's owning the more of the day-to-day run the business, these are the things that are working and working well, and I'm owning this project, and then this person's going and focusing at a higher level or more cross-functionally at where there are opportunities to drive efficiency across the team or organization.
Okay, I want to come back to this, but I know Mike had another question, so
I spent a brief stint in the world of project management, particularly in SaaS, at an organization known as MavenLink, or formerly known as MavenLink, now known as Cantata, since it went through its convergence with the other organization. And so I was just like, the nuance, like the nuance between project management and program management. I was just on with another individual this morning named Anna, who was talking about like those are pretty distinctly different responsibilities. And it sounds like obviously you're advocating for the same, but there's nuance of elements of what you do in program can translate to project. But then I was like, all right, is there an in between? I want to ask this question for the sake of asking it. Like, is there an in between? Is there portfolio management that sits somewhere in the middle of program and projects, and then like resource management, like people, like that part of it? Because like that's a different skill set in general, I think, because like I don't know. I feel like the project manager's responsibility of thinking about like execution of the entire thing, like marketing ops people, we end up with lots of responsibilities that sometimes are not really shouldn't necessarily be ours. And so, I want to hear your thoughts about like, all right, is a project manager also the person that's supposed to staff the project and resource it? Just yeah.
There's a lot to unpack there.
Sorry.
No, it's great. It's in the portfolio management piece, I've never worked at an organization where we had portfolio management, but it was sort of tossed around of like, does that actually sit above program management and you have multiple programs in a portfolio, or is it underneath and it's projects into portfolios and then into a larger program? I think it's just the organization has to pick the nomenclature and the structure and then just figure it out from there in some cases. But yeah, on the resourcing and side of things, I agree that like project management at the end of the day is like down to the tactical execution of things. And as a project manager, I never was responsible for staffing and resourcing. I turned to other key stakeholders or the executive sponsor or the person who was running the overall program to do that component of it. Mm-hmm. And so I think the way that I've seen it work and the way that I think about it is, the program managers or the people overseeing are much more about the building the rapport and the relationship management and the resourcing and making sure that they're helping block and tackle for the project managers and keeping their eye on things, and they're not in the weeds of any of the projects and they're not doing the tactical execution. It's much more relational and strategic in my mind, and a lot of time spent in the conference rooms and presenting to the executives and things like that, and kind of clearing the deck for the project managers to get the shit done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. That resonates greatly with me. And I think like, just to pull that back into, the marketing ops side of things, like particularly those campaign ops individuals, like that you have to strike this balance between like, I'm both the sort of execution person, but also like, I can't do it all myself, right? Like I can't go schedule all the posts on social media. I need other resources to do that. And so, as a part of this overarching campaign we're trying to put out into the market, there's these other resources that need to be there. And I think it's important for, if there's like an executive listening to this, or a people manager, or somebody trying to build out an org, it's important to think about like, hey, there's this whole other facet of the world, this project and program management, that has a lot of parallels, right, to marketing ops and revenue operations. And it requires that there's more people involved than just this one person. And so I just wanted to definitely like pull that back in that regard.
So many different thoughts here. So first off, when you brought up portfolio management, my head went to, like, to me, that's a process, right? And it has, to me, at least that's what I've called it. And it has to do with like evaluating different ideas, initiatives, things we could potentially be working on, projects, but we have limited capacity, and go like, okay, how do we make the best decision about which of those we do first, right? And can we do some of them in parallel and all that kind of stuff? We can get to that. One of the things though that keep, like, it's really getting into my craw here is, and I think I've said this to other people too, is one of the things I feel is very, very common in marketing in general is that we expect domain experts for, call it digital or social or paid search or marketing ops or whatever, to also be really good at managing projects. And in my experience, that's not really the case. And I think what would be interesting is to get your perspective, Paula, on like, how could we think? And I'm throwing this at you from left field, so I'm going to try to take how can we think about, as marketing ops leaders or professionals, on how to build a case for, whether it's for marketing ops, which tends to have a lot of volume of activity, or creative does too, or marketing in general, right, to advocate for, we really need, there's a point in time where I think when you're small enough, right, I think there's enough connective tissue and people working on the same thing, and they're probably working very much every day. At a certain point, you go like, now there's disconnection and misalignment. And I think project management, program management can play a role in that. Like, so how do you advocate for having that as a discipline that is part of the team that happens to work with marketing, right? I'm curious what how have you built a case for that? Have you built a case for something like that before within a business, or if you had like a PMO office, right? How do we allocate, like, get a dedicated resource to that functional area?
Yeah. Oh, I'm passionate about this topic.
Oh, good.
I feel strongly that project managers and program managers, that's a very distinct skill set and expertise.
Couldn't agree more.
You're asking a creative person to project manage something, like that's just, those are entirely two different domains and expertise. So I feel very strongly that most teams and most parts of an organization should have a project manager, a program manager, if not multiple. And whether or not they're all then managed out of a project management, a PMO, project management office, and then sort of deployed out, or they live on that team and report there, like, that's up for debate. And I have feelings about that too. But
bring it. Come on. Yeah. Don't hold back.
But just like, yes, I think that, like, again, asking the creative person who's supposed to be doing the graphic design or manage, or something with a campaign, is not the same person who should be, working on the dependencies and the contingencies and the risk mitigation and the budget and the dates and keeping the Monday.coms of the world and the Asanas up to date and all of that, and building the project plan. Like, that is its own distinct skill set. And sometimes people don't realize that. I think a lot of people assume project management is easy to do well. And I mean, half of what I do when I fight for project managers, especially when I have big projects, is like, I need somebody who's going to hold me accountable as the owner of the project, because I've been a project manager. I can do that. And I know the functional area, but I can't really do both effectively. And that's the challenge I keep running into. Absolutely. And on the flip side, as a project manager and a program manager, sometimes we forget that other people aren't good at thinking this way too. And we're like, what? Why is this hard for you to understand? Why are you not following that this new request that you have has downstream impact and ramifications? Well, not thinking. They're thinking about what's right in front of them and that they need the thing. So yeah, but having a project program manager role within each part of an organization or a team, I think is the way to go in my experience.
I feel like the last comment you just made was like, and all of the marketing ops listeners' hands went up because they were like, "How are you not thinking about the downstream impacts of that new field you want to put into Salesforce, or that oh, you want me to send an email campaign today? Like what?
What? Yeah."
Yes. There's like this like immediate visceral like, oh yeah, that's the thing. Like people don't think about the overarching sort of ramifications of the requests that they're making ever unless you actually have ever spent time in the function, I think, or have spent time enough with people in those functions to know better, right?
Absolutely.
But and to your point, like, or I guess just to, I don't know, in support of it, like it, ironically, it took our marketing organization when I was at Maven Link, it took us like, I don't know, 8 years to eventually get somebody who was like project management oriented, like for our own team. We're a SaaS project management company at the time without a project manager for our own go-to-markets and stuff. It was like we were all trying to like haphazardly manage each other like at our projects, and like what I know is once we had somebody who was tasked with it, stuff started to move along a lot faster. And there was like clarity. And I cannot advocate enough for organizations having somebody responsible for that. It feels like extra headcount and cost, but it is cost savings at the end of the day because you are not spinning your wheels.
I think I was just going to like, I think that you're touching on the thread of how do you build the case for it, which is, I think, one of the questions said, which is like, what's the cost of a delay, right, of a campaign launch, right? There's some hidden cost there.
Probably a lot more than the salary for someone who can manage that project than others throughout the year, right? So a strong advocate for that as well. Yeah.
All right. So what's your opinion about the location of these experts within an organization?
Yeah. Okay. So I think the idea of a project management office is awesome because, as we've talked about, skill sets and expertise are different. Such a great opportunity for those folks to be managed by someone who's like a VP of project management and brings those folks together for team meetings at whatever cadence, and they're cross-pollinating and they're sharing best practices and things like that. I think it absolutely makes sense that they're managed by their own kind, if you will. But I do think that those folks should then typically work with a team regularly. So it's not just based on bandwidth necessarily, and I could go work on a marketing project and I'm going to get shipped over to sales and I'm going here or there. I think that I should then always work with the marketing operations team or rev ops or whatever it may be, because to me, so much of project and program management is relationship building and building that rapport and building that trust so that you can say, hey, that request that you asked for does have these downstream impact. And you can go say that to someone who's at a higher level than you and have built that rapport and respect and trust where they're going to say, okay, well, here's why I'm asking you to do this. And you can kind of walk them through it. So, and then also the favor that you need from time to time as a project manager, like the scratching of the back, and you need to have built those relationships. And if you're being bounced around all the time, that's just not going to happen.
Hey everyone, Mike Rizzo here, CEO of MarketingOps.com and co-host of OpsCast. I've got a little secret to share with you, something that's been one of the best kept perks of our community until now. At MarketingOps.com, we've built a hiring program that's changing the game for marketing operations recruitment, and we're finally sharing it with the world. Our community is over 22,000 strong, And within that, we have over 4,400 members who are actively and passively seeking new opportunities. These are seasoned professionals with skills and experience spanning platforms like HubSpot, Pardot, Marketo, and so much more. Plus, we can help you fine-tune your outreach, targeting exactly the right candidates by region, years of experience, seniority level, or even agency experience. But here's the real cherry on top. When you hire through our program, your new team member gets a free membership or a virtual ticket to our annual conference. From day one, they're not just stepping into a new role, they're getting access to the training, networking, and support they need to hit the ground running. So if you're ready to unlock this incredible opportunity, it's time to let this secret out. Visit marketingops.com and find your next star teammate today. Thanks for listening, and as always, keep optimizing.
I like that answer. It's interesting because I've worked with project managers that are, even if they weren't in a centralized program management office, but their expertise has been in project management, program management in a different functional area. I've had them say, like, I'm really struggling with how to manage this project because I don't understand the domain. It's not the words they use, but something to that effect, right? And I think there's a lot to be said for having a domain expertise growing enough until you get, I mean, over time, like if you get experience in different domains and how they're connected, I think there's some value there too, but for sure early on.
Absolutely. Otherwise, there's going to be so much like upstart time required for every project where the project manager's coming in and they need to learn the people, the processes, the terminology.
Terminology is huge.
Yeah, exactly. How can they possibly walk into a meeting and keep up if they don't know what the heck you're talking about?
Well, or worse, and this is where it usually would come up from my perspective is we'd be in, say, a core team meeting talking about stuff, and the project manager doesn't realize that that other person just said something that's actually a red flag.
Yep.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
That sounded like a red flag, but actually is not a big deal.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And not knowing the difference between those. And so then not knowing where to react and call things. So that's very interesting. So, okay, I want to go back to, you talked about programs, sort of the structural things, like programs and then projects, and maybe portfolio management fits in there somewhere, but it needs to be defined. But you talked about that tied back to some sort of company or organizational objectives, right? Whatever you call them, right? KPIs, MBOs, goals, whatever. But this is another area I think I've seen struggles, or at least I've struggled with it in two different ways. One was, if you've got these big picture overall company goals, right? How do you then go, this project I'm working on here is linked to that objective, and here's how, right? So like be able to show the connection. The other, I think, then comes in with, hey, someone's got this brilliant idea, right? And it maybe doesn't align with one of those goals. So how do you then, from that, that's what I would call portfolio management, the decision process for evaluating new ideas and then deciding how to prioritize them in a little more robust way than just stack ranking or whoever's, got the biggest title. Like, have you seen those same kinds of struggles, and how have you dealt with those?
I love this subtle shade just now. Whoever's got the biggest titles.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's like
it happens all the time,
right?
No, I agree. I'm super excited about your thoughts on this, Paula.
Yeah, I think so. The last SaaS company that I was at was actually a company called Workboard, which was a strategy execution platform, but it started as an OKR platform, generally speaking. So OKRs are something that I'm quite passionate about as well, and KPIs, whatever you want to say. Like ultimately, what are the things we're doing to drive the business, and then let's make sure that all the work that's happening at all levels of the organization roll back up to that, or you should probably be questioning why the heck you're working on this. But how do you do that if you don't have visibility and you don't know? So one of the things that I think is most important is having quarterly reviews where you're setting your next quarter objectives and strategy and figuring out all of the programmatic impacts or project impacts those have. And then at the end of the quarter, you're kind of tying off on those things and figuring out where did we miss, where did we meet, how do we need to adjust for next quarter. And that's the time for each team to come together, come together as their own teams, first and foremost, to have those conversations and say, this project doesn't actually feel like it's still aligned to this new objective that our CEO is the edict from leadership. This doesn't quite, so we should flag that to our team lead or whoever to bring that back. Because if you're doing the objectives and key results and strategy setting correctly, you're meeting as a team to review that stuff, but then the team leads are coming together too. So the marketing and sales and CS and all these different folks are coming together to then review against one another and make sure that their stuff dovetails nicely too. So I think that sets in place a good checks and balance. And then ultimately, hopefully you have some kind of tool or tools where you have that visibility to see what are we after as a company? What is each team working on? Okay, now we have a project management tool where we're tracking all of these different things. And so we can check ourselves regularly to make sure that we're all marching in the same direction here and doing work that matters for the business.
Okay, so I think you hinted at this, but as part of that suggested quarterly review, actually going to say whether it's because there's an issue with the project, right? Like some unexpected thing or a risk came up that actually is a significant one, and it's actually, despite mitigation efforts or whatever, right, it's off the rails, or because objectives, right, or a new sort of direction. Are you like, have you seen? I have seen people struggle with the, I guess I would call it the sunk cost fallacy, right? We've spent this much money and effort in this thing. We need to keep it going, even though it's not aligned, right? So how have you seen people successfully get over, like, we actually need to just stop this project or postpone it or hold on it or whatever?
Yeah. I mean, it's tough to make that call. It's tough to have those conversations, but
egos are tied up in this stuff, right?
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. And especially if you're a project manager or program manager, you're not the VP of anything yet. And so you're the one, it is your job. You own the scope of this project to raise the flag and say, like, this is how much money we've burned, or this is how behind we are, or these are all of the risks that I see. And here's some ideas on how to mitigate. And here's where we're blocked, et cetera, et cetera. Provide all the facts and the data, make your recommendation, but you have to advocate for that and you have to speak up. And whether that's, you have direct access to some of those leaders and executives, great. You may not at your level in your career. You may just have to go to your manager and have them bring it up the chain from there. But that is your job. And I've had to do that a few different times. And sometimes my recommendation was taken and we did hit pause or we scrapped. And sometimes it was like, don't care, Paula, keep going. Like, all right, whatever you say.
But I think it's not for the faint of heart, I think is what
No, it's not. It's not. It's really not. And I think project management, you said earlier, some people think project program management is easy. Man, if they only knew. You just have a constant target on your back. You're the one throat to choke.
Well, and I know, they have to deal with people like me. Like, I am all over the place. I don't have, it's so but I at least recognize that. So I actually have worked with project managers where they are starting to raise flag and concern. I'm like, they feel uncomfortable speaking up. I'm like, no, you need to speak up. Even if I disagree with you, that's your job. Yeah. So, for any of you out there who are leaders or team leaders or whatever, and you've got project managers who maybe you're butting heads because you don't agree on it, you need to give them the ability to speak up and argue their case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. I want to, so the OKR piece, Paula, you're talking about sort of objectives, key results, planning frameworks. Do you have a particular, well, I guess two questions ish. When you step into an organization as a consultant, is that where you start? Where you're saying hey, tell me how you, as a department or as an organization, if you're a startup or something like that, how you think about success? Because for me, OKRs, like, I always come back to what is the definition of success? And often that is like, you can get there through OKRs. But like, I don't know. I don't know if that's like the preferred method, if you like any other methods. Like, so I guess what I'm getting at is like, is that normally how you step into an organization and ask those questions? And do you have a preferred sort of model for planning that organizations take on?
Yeah, I think a couple things. So call them what you want: OKRs, KPIs, goals, strategies, etc. At the end of the day, like harkening back to my comment earlier, like we're talking about outcomes versus outputs. Like ultimately, what are we trying to achieve? And then we'll figure out the rest from there. When I'm working with clients, I think it depends on the scope of my work. So yes, ultimately, I do want to understand, like, what is this business or organization trying to achieve this year, this quarter, or whatever the case may be. But in some cases, my scope may be a bit smaller, where still good information to have, but I'm more interested in, what is this team trying to achieve by implementing this tool or doing this evaluation and things like that, so that we can then make sure we're figuring out what the right outputs are. But yeah, I think the different frameworks, again, it's an organizational choice which one you want to use, but definitely conversations that should be being had.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I think in general, what I've seen now in my career is that as long as you have a framework, like just having one and sticking to it is a win.
Yes.
Right? Like, it sort of doesn't matter what version you want to do. Like, well, it does matter. I will say, like, you probably shouldn't like try to create a whole new framework. There's a reason these things have been around for a while, and companies make them work for themselves. But just sticking with one is probably a win,
at least for a while.
Yeah.
Well, I would argue one little bit with that, and that is having the framework is one thing, but then holding yourselves accountable to live up to what those goals are is a piece that I see often. Like, things just sort of get pushed.
Well, I would agree. I think that's the importance of having. So it's like, it's two things at least, right? Like, having somebody whose responsibility or who decides to take on the responsibility of saying, does that match what we said we wanted to do? Does that match our goals? Like, constantly asking that question over and over again, like someone feeling empowered enough to do that. That's a hard thing too, especially like regardless of what level you are. Even as a VP, like, you're going to end up in a situation where sometimes your own priorities might trump what you believe or what the organization originally believed was the thing we were going to work on. And so you don't even want to ask yourself that question.
Right.
And so, like, and then as you get down into the weeds of project and resource management and somebody who's doing this work, like, frankly, they should feel empowered, even at, like, pull it back to marketing ops, rev ops, right? If you're a campaign ops person, and you were a part, hopefully, cross your fingers, you were a part of the conversation that said, here's the things we're trying to do this quarter, or the goals we're trying to hit. You should feel empowered to say, but you just asked me to do this thing. Like, does that actually, like, is that what we should be doing? That's really, really hard. I don't know. Do you, like, Paula, how do you combat that? Like, do you appoint somebody and say, you should always ask this question? It's your job. One's going to yell at you.
That's a muscle you have to build, I think.
Yeah.
It's so hard, like, early on in our career, and, depending on personalities you're working with and so many different variables and things. But those are like the things we have to learn to do in a professional setting, right? And it's advocating for yourself in a lot of ways, because, again, like, if your job is to own this project and you're not bringing these things to the forefront and asking these questions and challenging, then ultimately you're not owning the project, and you're then it's going to get you in the end. So
I feel like we need a whole episode just on, like, forget whatever we call it, like, goal setting, right?
Yeah.
Organizational goal setting, team goal setting, personal goal setting, at least from a professional standpoint, because I think a lot of places do a pretty crummy job of that.
Yeah, I mean, there's countless amounts of software that try to help you with it too, not just on project and resource management, but like there's whole HR frameworks for like how do you grow in your career and all that stuff.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I think it is a hard muscle to build. I will say, the very first time that I ever really felt comfortable pushing back on a senior leader was probably only in the last like 4 years of my career, and I've been working for a while now. And part of that is experience, right? But part of that is also just like realizing that, that's actually what they want. Like at the end of the day,
Absolutely.
like as long as you're not being a jerk, like they
or
do
personal.
want you, or personal, right? Yeah. But like there is a business to be run, and this is what we said we were going to do, and by you taking that step and saying, "Hey, wait, like checkpoint here. Let's talk about this for a second," you earn an incredible amount of respect.
Absolutely.
Right? Absolutely. I'm going to call out both Audrey and Dan on our team because they do it. I'm all over the place.
Yep.
and they'll go, Audrey's super good at it, especially with Dan and I. She's like, hang on a second. Like, what is the priority here? And we're like, oh, I love you so much.
Yes.
like, thank you for asking that question. Right. And
totally.
So feel empowered, listeners.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's where like, bring the data with you. Like, leave the feelings out of it, but come with the dates and the budget and the impact and the, things like that. It's hard for an exec like that. You're right. That's the information that they want to hear. These are the things that they need to hear. That's what they should then make their decision based off of, and you can sort of leave your feelings out of it and approach it diplomatically.
But for sure.
Yeah.
Like you can recognize that there might be feelings and ego. I mentioned that like tied up in some of this. So recognizing that and provide so maybe not taking it completely out, but at least trying to go like, here's why, despite what you're feeling, I think, this is what I'm seeing. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I can't tell you that when I delivered the checkpoint to an executive for the first time that my whole body wasn't hot red. I was stressed.
I was gonna say, sweat through your shirt, but say it anyway.
Yeah. I mean, it was not easy. Like I was flushed for sure.
Yeah, totally.
But it was well received and respected, and I think that's important. And like, I'm a millennial. We were for quite a while there was a ton of conversation about how lazy we all were and all this other stuff, right? And so I had a fun project where I was like, I'm going to start a website where we just celebrate the awesome, most like ambitious millennials out there to try to combat that whole thing. But I digress. So like one of the things that a symptom of being young in your career, like, I don't know. Like, I think everybody who's growing in the career is going to experience this challenge. You do have to figure out how to manage those conversations. But like, goodness me, please don't just be a yes person. Like, for everybody who's growing in their career right now, we all want you to come up with ideas and throw stuff against the wall to see what sticks. And it's like totally okay. But like, I think there's just like this misconception as employees, especially like in a world where things just feel easier now. And like, all right, I got my job and people are telling me what to do. And then there's this like, at what point do I go from people telling me what to do to like, I now need to be a part of the business that's moving the machine forward versus just like, all right, now go push this button.
Yeah.
And so I don't know.
I don't know about like it. So I am not a millennial by a long shot.
Wait, what?
But I was always like, I always wanted to understand the why behind what I was being asked to do, even in my very first jobs, probably to the utter annoyance of the people who managed me. But it wasn't I wasn't being a jerk about it. I was really curious. Like I just felt like I could do a better job. I think intuitively, I couldn't have explained it back then.
Yeah.
Anyway, we could go off on this one for a while. I could. I want to go back. Let's pull it back to the project and program management. So we've kind of talked about some things around. I guess Mike's going to roll his eyes. Best practices for project management. What Paula doesn't know.
What are those?
That's like fingernails on a chalkboard to me. I hate that phrase.
Yeah.
I'd prefer guiding principles. Right. So anyway, but let's just, because everybody else likes best practices. Like what, are there any sort of general things that you think our listeners, especially if you can tie it back to the marketing domain, should be thinking about in terms of how to either get better themselves at project management? So let's assume they're not going to get a dedicated resource anytime soon if they don't already have one, or what they might be thinking about when they're looking at either tools, or maybe you get the chance to get somebody brought in.
Yeah. Yeah. I think having a project management tool, if the teams don't already, is really important. So I mentioned like Asana or Monday.com, or, tools like that are great because, one, it'll help you stay on track, but two, offers that visibility to the rest of the team. So that's really important. So I've seen a lot of organizations where we're like, well, we're kind of in Google Docs and over here in Sheets, and like we cobble it together and it works, but that will not work forever. I can guarantee that. So leveraging a tool, I think that, having an executive sponsor as often as possible for different projects and programs is important, or at least that person who has a seat at the table to go and raise the flag if you can't do that directly, or share the updates and things like that is also important. Getting really clear again on what the goals and outcomes are, as well as the outputs. And then, I mean, the most basic thing in my mind that I think it is clear to us as project and program managers, and maybe not to the rest of the world, is the notion of working right to left instead of left to right. So where am I trying to end? And then let's work backward from there. And then let's think about all of the connective tissue and the dependencies and the things that could go wrong and all of that, instead of we're starting from today and we're supposed to end here and then let's wedge this all together. I think starting right to left is really important.
You hit upon having a sponsor or executive leader. So one of the things I've found that's been helpful is also being really clear about, especially for like large complex projects, like team structure, right? Having, here's our core team and this is what they're going to be focused on. Here's our key stakeholders who are going to be actively involved in and out at different times, but not like every day, every week for the, and then there's like the executive team who just needs to know, and then being really clear about roles, responsibilities, decision-making process, like, getting approvals and all that kind of stuff. Is that kind of fall in that same realm?
Yeah, I love a project charter for that. So like a one-page document that says exactly those things. Here's the executive leader, here's the project, the scope, the budget, the dates, here's the project manager, the person that's going to project manager this thing, and all the roles and responsibilities. And then that sort of becomes your source of truth. And then you build the project plan after that is approved. That's really important, because then that's the one piece of paper that you can take back around and say, no, this is what you told me to do, and I have your approval on it. And so I built this project plan around that. And I think that can help aid in some of those harder conversations we're talking about, where we're saying, oh, we're off the rails here. What happened? Do we need to go back to the project and revisit?
Well, and I mean, I've struggled with getting adoption of things like a RACI, right? Uh-huh. But I mean, I think that, to me, one of the things that very quickly gets projects off the rails is we clearly said, okay, Paula, you're going to be the one who approves things as we go along the way. Mm-hmm. Mike, you're going to have input. Well, Mike goes around it and says, no, I don't approve. What? Too bad. We all agreed. Paula is the one who's approving. And you need to have your voice and state your case, but we need to have somebody who's going to make a decision so we can keep moving in a timely manner. Mm-hmm. And I see too many places where it's really like that, being really not being clear about who the decision makers are.
Yes. And
I even hate it, that being plural in most cases, but okay, that's reality. That to me is one of the big ones that I've struggled. Like, if that's not the case, then I always worry, like, Either we either need to have one person or it's going to be me. Like I'll do it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Decision makers plural is scary, but very common.
Yes.
And a RACI is like, I've built 100 of those, and it's so good in theory, and in practice, it's so hard to execute against. And
yes.
But that's where I think a project charter just coming in at a little bit higher level than that. And honestly, allowing the project manager, whoever's managing the project, if you're not a PM by trade, allowing them to be the owner and to route through them as much as possible. And then they can go meet with the one or two key stakeholders or decision makers. When it falls off is where everyone's going to everyone and nobody's in charge at that point.
Totally. All right. Well, so we're kind of running towards the end of our time here. So let me just put it. This has been an interesting conversation. I feel like we could go on for another hour, but why don't we just leave it at this? Like, is there anything that we either haven't covered or that we covered just a little bit, and you want to clarify that you want to make sure our listeners walk away from this knowing?
I mean, we covered so many things today, but I think the two pieces I feel most passionately about and that I have found have helped me in my career and then now working with clients is always be the person who's like looking around and looking for where should I raise the flag or where are things working really well and we should go do that or go double down on that and advocate and speak up. Because I think that lends itself to just doing that for yourself in your own career too. I'm a huge proponent for self advocating. Just building that muscle to have the hard conversations. Like start doing that as early in your career as possible, and that's really going to set you up for a lot of success and a lot of respect and rapport. So.
Yeah. And I would encourage you, any of our listeners, if you don't already have a manager or somebody within your organization who can help you learn how to build that muscle, then come to the community or something like that. Find a mentor. Yeah. Because there's some people who can help you deal with that you got a real situation at your work today. Right? How do I raise this issue in a way that's not going to undermine things?
Yeah.
This has been great. The thing I'm walking away from, I love this, like the difference between outcomes and outputs, like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to steal that. So if you've got a trademark, too bad.
Sadly, I don't.
Just pay me royalties, you'll be fine.
Yeah. And I think, and the last thing I'll say is like, if you don't have a project management tool, get one. Please stop using spreadsheets. Like, please.
I really was trying to avoid specific tools, but don't get Basecamp.
Don't. Yep. Oh gosh, sorry. I'm supposed to be agnostic. But yeah, sorry. That one's not an actual tool for managing. Like there's a lot of great use cases for it, don't get me wrong, but like full project management, no. Yeah. I've tried.
Yeah.
Anyway. Strike that from the record. Just kidding.
You could put it on me. That's okay. I've said it out loud many, many times. Right. So sorry. So if the folks from Basecamp want to have beef,
like, I'll show you.
Yeah. Show me. Like I am more than happy to be proved wrong.
Yes. That's right. Same. Paula, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
Absolutely. This is fun. Thanks for having me.
So if folks want to connect with you or keep up with what you're doing or what you're saying out there, I don't know if you're on, like what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, LinkedIn for sure. Just Paula Gorman. And I do have a website that's kind of morphing day to day as we speak. My email address is on there, but probably LinkedIn's the best way for now.
Perfect. Well, it's been a lot of fun, Paula, and I think we really could have covered even more ground if we had more time, but really appreciate you taking the time and being patient as I've been struggling with getting time allocated toward these. So, and thank you, Mike, and thanks to our listeners and the rest of our audience. And we appreciate your support and patience, and hopefully we'll get back on a regular train of getting more of these out. So Until next time, thanks everybody. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.